Hi, I'm Taylor with Mom on the Spectrum, and in this video, we're going to be exploring autistic versus neurotypical needs in a relationship. If you find yourself in this type of relationship with these dynamics, it might seem like you're both operating with different instruction manuals, different user guides. And I'm here today to explore both of those guides with you. Neither of them is wrong. It kind of might just feel like they're written in different languages. So these terms, autistic and neurotypical, they're going to be used loosely in this video. You can't define either group by a certain set of experiences, but we'll kind of zoom out, speak broadly about autistic and neurotypical patterns, and hopefully by the end, you'll have a deeper appreciation of your partner. Okay, let's start with what neurotypical people often need in relationships. Again, these are generalizations and won't apply to every neurotypical person. First of all, emotional reciprocity, which might look like frequent check-ins, verbal validation, maybe hearing I love you, how was your day, that type of thing. They might also want shared rhythm, so maybe enjoying spontaneous plans, flexible timing, kind of going with the flow socially. They might want connection through presence, so feeling close by doing things together or chatting. They also might feel connected and seen with things like eye contact and mirroring, so being able to read warmth and safety from the other person through visible cues. And they also might feel like they repair things relationally through conversation, so wanting to talk it out maybe immediately after conflict. With these types of relationship dynamics, silence might feel kind of threatening. It might feel like distance, like something is really wrong. But we're going to get into what that might mean for an autistic person. So this next section, what autistic people often need, let's dive into that. And if this video is helpful to you, if you could please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, that really helps me out so much. So in relationships, autistic people often need predictability and processing time. We might need space before talking things through. Oftentimes, me as an autistic person, I need to regulate myself before I can have an emotionally charged conversation. It doesn't always take a long time for me to do that, but sometimes even just stepping into another room, going into my closet and just having a quiet moment where I can regain my breathing, figure out how I'm feeling, because a lot of times I take on other people's emotions. So it's important for me to get quiet enough to hear myself and figure out what I want and need in the situation, so that I can show up as myself and not like as a mirror of another person. Autistic people also often need nonverbal connection. So this could be sharing presence without the pressure to chat. So you can maybe start to see some differences in these needs that autistic and neurotypicals have. Sometimes they can feel like they're juxtaposed because chatting oftentimes for autistic people can feel very burdensome, especially if it's like surface level chat. Sometimes we just want to go deep. And I know oftentimes neurotypicals, let's say they get home at the end of the workday and they're feeling, small talk can help them just kind of take some pressure off of the day. It can help them feel connection without having to expend too much energy by going deep. And oftentimes autistic people can be the opposite. Autistic people might also appreciate consistency over spontaneity, so knowing what to expect feels a lot safer than surprises. We also value honesty and directness, so subtle hints or tone shifts might not register as intended. We prefer clear statements and to be straightforward. Again, these are generalizations, but sometimes what we say comes across as hurtful or intense, or like maybe we ask a lot of questions, which can feel like an attack to the other person sometimes, like we're questioning you, because literally we are, but it can feel like we're just being intense or like not trusting you or something. But oftentimes we just need to ask a lot of questions to understand our situation. Another thing that autistic people might need is regulating first and finding resolution second. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, but oftentimes it's really important for us to have that alone solitary time so that we can regulate our nervous system. And oftentimes if I don't do that before an argument or a conversation, oftentimes if autistic people don't have this time before trying to find resolution, we can come across as cold or distant or uncaring. And that's, for me, it's because there's so much processing happening internally that I might look unaffected on the outside, but it's just because it's kind of like this analogy, this picture that I share often in videos on my channel. It's like a duck that's swimming across the pond, and they look really calm and unbothered on the outside, but under the surface, like their feet are kicking wildly, helping them get to where they're going. So on the surface, we might appear, unbothered, but under the surface, there's a lot of stuff happening. Speaking of processing and nervous system regulation, this is my Ono fidget roller. This is my favorite fidget ever. Ono makes very high quality products. If you're kind of a geek on like things being made well, like me, this is made so well. It's designed by an engineer with ADHD who wanted to get every single detail right. So I'll put a link in the description. If you're a neurotypical person watching this would actually be a really great gift to show your autistic partner that you appreciate their sensory needs. So I'll put a link in the description, and there's a discount code you can use as well. And the last point for what autistic people often need in relationships is deep versus frequent connection. So I know me personally, I would much prefer to have deep connection rather than frequent little surface level connections. I understand the importance of both, especially for non-autistic or allistic people, but it feels much more rewarding to have those deep shared moments of connection, even if they're less frequent than those small surface level interactions. Both have a place, but I generally, and autistic people that I work with and learn from, typically prefer those deep connections as well. So let's talk about where it goes wrong. All right, so one partner might think that silence equals disinterest. So we kind of talked about, for autistic people, it might look like we're disinterested or being cold or distant, but really we're just processing a lot. The other might feel smothered or overstimulated by constant interaction. One assumes if you cared, you'd reach out more. And the other might think if you loved me, you'd give me more space to think. So these examples of how things can go wrong, these are also examples of internalized dialogue that we might be repeating. If they're not talking to me, that means they don't care. If they're not hugging me, that means that they don't, they're not interested in hearing about my day. Or we have all of these scripts that play internally that may or may not be true. So let's talk about how to actually bridge the gap with these differences. So first of all, it can be really important to discuss and agree on each other's connection languages. How do each of you receive and respond to connection? If one of you needs touch to feel connected, talk about what that looks like. Talk about, finding common ground, maybe a way to express touch in a way that doesn't feel too overstimulating for someone, but that's still honoring both of your needs. You can also schedule predictable together time so that there's something on the calendar. We're going to be able to spend time together here. It's not going to be a surprise. It's something that you can expect and look forward to during the week. And that can be something that you maybe sit down and plan every week. If you're a parent like me, the calendar fills up really quickly. So maybe sitting down at the beginning of each month or each week and putting something on the calendar where you're going to be able to share some time together. You can clarify conflict timing. So do you want to talk about this now, or can we revisit this later? I know that's one thing I've learned that's really important for myself, is saying something like, I do really care about this issue, but I'm not ready to talk about it yet. Can you give me some time to process? Those types of statements are really important because it lets the other partner know, I am invested, I do care, but I just don't quite have the words or emotional capacity to respond to this right now. And you could even set a time to check in, like, let's check in about this tomorrow morning. I think I mentioned this in other videos, but many of us have heard the adage, is that the right word? Don't let the sun go down when you're angry. I say for autistic people, like, sometimes it's okay to go to sleep when you're angry. Sometimes you just need a reset. So it's not all about, I hear a lot of times people will give marriage advice of like, don't go to bed angry. Make sure that you talk about it before you go to sleep. I think oftentimes that might not be the case for neurodivergent people. Sometimes we just need processing time. So maybe you could say something like, hey, can we revisit this tomorrow after breakfast? I want to make sure that I hear you and hear where you're coming from. I just need some time to think about this. Also, using direct language over hints. Okay, this is very important, especially for autistic people. Please don't make us read between the lines, where we tend to be very straightforward people. So we're going to interpret what you say pretty literally. So please be specific. And that can be very vulnerable. If you're being specific and straightforward about what you want and need, I want to acknowledge the vulnerability and courage that takes to do so. That's a very important part of being in a relationship with an autistic person, and vice versa, for both partners to be able to learn how to articulate what you want and need, and using direct language. So the clearer you can be about what you want and need, the better chance you give the other person of being able to meet that need, rather than hoping that they're a mind reader. That's usually a recipe for frustration and conflict. And then the last point is just to learn how to celebrate each other's differences. There's going to be quirks in every relationship. If you can learn how to embrace those things, how to laugh at yourself, that's such a great life skill. How to not take yourself too seriously, how to kind of roll with the flow of life. I think we're all learning that one, but just not taking yourself too seriously. Staying curious about your partner's patterns and interests and desires, asking questions from a place of compassion. These are all things that can bring us closer together. So I'd love to hear in the comments, what's one mismatch that you've experienced in your relationship if you're dealing with that autistic neurotypical connection? Let's hear from some of you. Let's hear some tools and strategies that you've implemented. I've heard some really creative ones come out of the community that help bridge the gap and create a deeper sense of connection. Again, I'll put the link to my Ono roller in the description. I think you'll love it as much as I do. And like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.